Hi, and welcome to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. Today we have our special guest, Jeff Sarault, who is a business-to-business sales consultant. Everybody, welcome back to the Kale Houser Leadership Secrets podcast. I'm Kale Houser. Thank you so much for joining me today. I want to introduce our special guest, Jeff Sarault. He is a business-to-business sales consultant and Grant Cardone licensee, basically the expert in all things sales as related to business. And I want to give him a chance to talk about what he does, how he got to be where he's at, and how he helps small businesses increase their sales. Jeff, thank you so much for joining me today. It's great to see you.
It's great to see you, and thanks so much for inviting me. It's always great to have chats like this, so I'm looking forward to this one.
Yes, I've been looking forward to this too since we pretty much first met a couple months ago at a workshop, and then recently again down here in Miami.
Yeah.
The opportunity to talk to somebody that is in your space that gets to talk to all sorts of different kinds of businesses as you consult with them and teach them sales really is up my alley of what I'm interested in the leadership aspect of those businesses. So I wanted to hopefully pick your brain a little bit about what you've seen and how, as you've gone about your business and consulting, the different styles of leadership that you run into with these small businesses that you deal with and how you handle that in those different aspects, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Would love to chat about that. Excellent.
Cool.
You want to start there, or where do you want to start today? Yeah. So
that's perfect.
So my background is really in the media, and so I work with a lot of sales teams and a lot of sales people that come from media sales and those types of industries where they're selling intangibles. But the media industry is to focus a little bit on the leadership side of things. The media industry sometimes can be an archaic business where these TV stations or radio stations or traditional media outlets, like people who have worked in those industries tend to have been in them for a very long time. So the leaders tend to have very antiquated leadership styles. And that's one of the things that I run into all the time is I'll work with like new sales reps, and they'll complain about how they're being taught to do things that might have been effective in the 80s, but might not be so relevant to today's world. So when you talk about leadership, I find that a lot of times people get into these leadership positions sometimes by accident or by default, and they don't often keep up to date with ways to be effective leaders in today's world. They lean on things they may have known from the past. And I'm not sure that only applies to media. I think every industry probably has people who don't develop themselves and might be abrasive or irrelevant leaders in today's society.
No chance. I think that's
probably not. I'm probably making that up. Forget I even mentioned it. We can cut that part out. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So
really fascinating because I just wanted to say that because and I talked about this in the previous episode, is you get that a lot with you have a technical expert, and whether they started as a young salesman, whenever they came out of college or whatever their path was, and they just naturally progressed because they hung around, but not necessarily showing any true leadership abilities other than maybe they were good at, dealing with customers or good at whatever that thing is in the media realm that qualifies them for promotion and then eventually leading other people. And that is fascinating, the end of it, that, as with most industries, there isn't much leadership training at all available to people, and they just kind of figure it out.
It's so true that whether it's leadership or sales or, personal interaction, human resources, whatever, a lot of companies do a great job of product training, but they don't do the other stuff. And unfortunately, the product training a lot of times is the least important training, right? Because you can sort of pick some of these things up along the way if you are at least a C- student, right? But leadership requires mentorship. It requires guidance. It requires you to view other people being good leaders so that you can adapt that into your personal style. And when companies don't offer that, or when a person doesn't take it upon themselves to learn those skills, what happens is that every day that goes by, they become less effective and less relevant.
Yeah.
And
Correct.
that's where we see in a lot of what I like to call legacy businesses, the media, car sales, things like that, where these are industries that have been around forever. But, I would venture to bet you could walk onto almost any auto dealership lot in America today and almost know exactly what's going to happen to you, because it's going to be a cringeworthy experience, because it's just the way they've always done it.
Yes.
And that's what, in the businesses I work with, we try to cut that off as quickly as possible. Like, how do we help the people who are in charge of this business groom their people so that their customers want to do business here? Like, that's the whole thing. And I know, right? But there's so many businesses that are doing it the wrong way, right? They're like, oh, listen, this is the way we've always sold cars. Correct. So this is the way you're going to sell cars.
Yes.
Might not be the leadership style. Like, because we've always done it this way is not a leadership style.
No, and that's not an excuse, right? And I think something that the underlying tone of what you were just saying is the intentionality of choosing to be a good leader, choosing to invest in your people instead of just being reactionary or making assumptions that, they're just going to develop themselves. Because I think we found, and most people understand, the reality is, those are the exceptions to the rule, those natural leaders, right? Those guys that are really charismatic and they care about other people. That's a very unique combination that just most people don't have. And you just don't naturally acquire it unless somebody has invested in you and mentored you towards that level. Have you found that?
I have found that. And I found that people want to be led. People want that learning opportunity to find out for themselves, or through mentorship or through leadership, how do I become better at this? Right. And how do I help other people be good at this? Right. But if people aren't shown the way or the option, or that there's a new viewpoint on how to be effective in whatever industry that you're in, then I like to say the rot sets in. If you leave a piece of meat on the counter for too long, it starts to rot, because it's just sitting there, and it's a dying thing unless you do something with it, unless you turn it into something else. Well, that's true with your people. If you just let them sit there in your sales department or in your marketing department or in your HR department, and you don't help them morph into something else along the way, then eventually you're going to look around, you're going to go, well, this person isn't very good anymore. It's like, no, they're still good. You just haven't developed them into anything that will help you grow your business. And that's what I think, showing people, teaching people. But the leader has to also, whoever the leader is, the manager, the business owner, whatever, that person also has to grow. You can't develop other people unless you yourself aren't growing.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I wholeheartedly agree.
Right.
Now, switching gears just a little bit. Now, you, if I remember correctly, came out of kind of a traditional corporate type of a world. Can you explain and talk about that process? Because I think a lot of our listeners kind of are in that realm of they're in that corporate environment, and they may not be working for a small business, but they're working for a department head, right, in a smaller organization of that nature. Can you talk a little bit about that style of, I don't know if leadership mentality is the right word, in the corporate structure, and then also your journey, how you went out of that into what you're doing now?
Sure. So, my personal story in that way is I, just to use the media as example, I work with a lot of people in that space because that's where I came from. When I was fresh out of high school, I got involved in radio and wanted to be on the radio. I thought that was what I was destined to do for my life. And I was running around the radio station one day, and I looked around and I noticed that some people were driving really nice cars and wearing really nice clothes. And I said, well, what do they do here? And somebody was like, well, they sell the advertising. And I was like, oh, how do I learn how to do all of that? And so what that led to other things, but eventually I got into corporate world where I was working for radio stations and TV stations that were owned by major media conglomerates. So, as I developed in my career, that was, as I met more leaders and managers, that was kind of how I learned, like, here's what I resonate with and here's what I don't resonate with as an employee. I think, and what I learned today in my current world of coaching and helping and consulting is there's a lot of people who get into their industry and they're excited about it and they want to learn more, but then at some point, the leadership above them either runs out or gets stagnant. So therefore the employee doesn't see the way forward and they become complacent. And so what happened to me was I had spent 15 years in radio and television. I ended up getting out of that industry and moving into like a sideline industry where I was working in the research business around media, which was great. I wanted to learn more about how advertising transactions worked and all this. But what happened was there was a level of technical selling there that I had not yet acquired. And so even though I had 15 years of experience in media sales, I was in a bit of a different industry and no one had developed those technical sales skills in me. And I thought I had them and I was wrong. So in the first 2 years of that job, out of 150 salespeople worldwide that we had, I was dead last for 2 years. The worst. I should have been fired. I tell people this, I should have been fired. And I was looking around going, something does not add up here. Like I know I'm not this bad. Something is missing. And what I learned then and what I help people do now is find training, find development opportunities that even if you come to your job or your industry with a bit of experience, there's always something more you can learn, or there's just a fine thing that you can do to be better and more effective. So what happened was I got access to that kind of information, sales training, development, and I went from the worst to the MVP of our global sales team in a year. And the only thing that I changed was the information I was putting in here.
Right.
And that was the switch. The fundamentals that I had were correct. It was I needed to learn how to negotiate bigger deals and longer sales cycles. And I just didn't have anybody teaching me how to do that. So it had and whether it's that or anything else, I meet a lot of salespeople or leaders or people who have somehow become department heads in their organization, and they don't know how to go beyond that. They don't understand, like, well, how do I become a bigger player in my business or in my industry? Well, the answer to that almost always is you need to learn something. You need to develop a skill so that you bring more value to the organization. And that's what a lot of people miss.
Yes, I agree. And I want to slightly off topic, but you said something that was really interesting to me and really fascinating. So there was, if you can think of the moment, right? So there was a moment, whether it was somebody told you like, dude, you're the worst salesman in our entire company, or you were looking at the reports and you're like, wait a minute, and you're all the way at the bottom, right? Because I think this is really important. One, as my audience that may be dealing with that type of person that you were at that point, right? What in your brain chose, I need to learn more because I'm missing something, versus I'm no good at this, I need to go find something else to do that I maybe am good, right? Like, can you think of a defining, whether it was a thought, a moment, a word from somebody else that, the quitting path, like, I'm not good at this, even though I've been doing it for 15 years, I thought I was good, versus I can be good at this. There is something out there that will make me good at this. Maybe there isn't, but
no, there was a specific moment actually where I had been in this job, in this particular role for 2 years, and I just wasn't making the money I was wanting to make. I wasn't, and I started just having conversations with other salespeople in the organization, and I was like learning how much they were billing for the company, and I'm like, wow, that's not. And then it started. I figured out, like, I'm the guy who sucks here, And so, and I don't know if it was a self-awareness thing or if it was just a frustration issue, but I knew that I had had success in the past, and I knew that those successes had led to promotions and job offers and all this other stuff. So that had stopped. There was I'll call it like a plateau of this in this particular job. And I'm like, okay, so do I quit? Do I, have I just reached the top of my capability? And I just decided like, I wasn't ready to just be complacent. I was ready to go find out, like, is there something else I could be doing here? So what I ended up doing was I decided to sit down and I looked at all the business I was working on, like the sales I was trying to get, or the customers that I couldn't get to meet with me or whatever. And I was like, what's the missing piece? And at that point it was, I'm not showing these people enough value to transact with me. And to transact, it doesn't necessarily mean a sale. Like I couldn't even get people to call me back or take a meeting with me or do a follow-up meeting. So there was something in there. And what I learned was through getting the right training and getting, the right coaching and information was the skill set that brought me to where I was not enough to get me to where I wanted to be. And I needed to figure out, in this particular case, I needed to convey my message of why someone should meet with me or do business with me in a way that more quickly said to them, if we meet, you will get X benefit shortly thereafter. And I was instead like leading with our product and service. I wasn't leading with what was in it for the client. And when I figured out that change in my delivery, it changed everything. But what until I got frustrated and until I got pissed off enough to think to myself, I'm going to get fired if I don't change this around, and luckily I did that before the worst situation could have happened. But, I say this, to make this point as well. Like my company at the time, and I don't work there anymore, that company wasn't investing in me either. Right. And so like when I talk to businesses today, I one of the conversations I have with sales managers or business owners is I'll say, who's your worst sales rep? And they immediately know who someone comes to mind instantly. And
it's Kale over there.
Yeah, that guy, Kale Houser, he's terrible. No, and so what I'll say is, okay, good. What made you think of them first? Like, what's the reason? When I asked you that question, why did Kale? I'm making a joke right now. Why did Kale's name come into your mind first? And they immediately know what they think that person isn't doing well or could be doing better. And my follow-up question is, well, what have you invested in that person to fix that?
Yeah.
And their answer is,
it is such a two-way street.
It's a total two-way street. And I liken it back to the situation I was in, which was no one was coming to me and going, here is how you can improve. At some point, thank goodness, I figured out that I needed to go get that information myself. But leaders today, people who are higher up in organizations, really need to pull their people up with them, right? They need to invest in them, and they need to go, you are so good. You're here. We need you to get here. And we only have to cover the gap between where you are today and the greatness that you could be bringing to the organization. And instead, a lot of leaders or people who are listed as leaders, they'll cut those people out and try to find somebody to replace them. And I'm like, no. You've invested in them. You've been paying them. There's just one thing we have to fix here, maybe two in the worst case scenario. Let's find out how we can develop this person to be what you want them to be. And that's a shorter distance than going to fire them and then trying to replace them with somebody else.
100%. And I wonder a lot of that in my talking to small business leaders too is, of course, everyone wants that 10 out of 10 employee, that guy that just shows up. Like I said, whether it's super charismatic, he knows exactly how to talk to clients and customers and all that stuff, or whatever that thing is for that business. And then they set that as the standard. Like, well, no, you just happen to find that one guy or gal that's a natural at that, that's like finding the Alex, whatever baseball player, the Roethlisberger, the Tom Brady, right? And even Tom Brady, love him or hate him, right? Went through a process of sucking until he kind of took off and became who he is.
Yeah, but you look at a guy like Tom Brady. Okay, like everybody talks about today what he is, what he, you know, what he
All
was,
the
and what
rings.
the value he brought in the rings and everything else. But it's like, that guy is working 100 times harder than everybody else out there. You know, I'm a Pittsburgh guy. I'm not allowed to like Tom Brady, but
I know. That crossed my brain as I was saying it.
No. Listen. You know, if I'm watching football, I hate his breathing guts. But as a human and as somebody who is a top performer, you have to look at him and you have to go, this is somebody who, you know, was not drafted at the top. You know, absolutely, you know, has no reason to be as great as he is, except for the fact that he decided he was going to be that type of a person, that type of a player. And I mean, that's something you can't take away from the guy. You know, I mean, the results are there, and people need to think, you don't just go get a Tom Brady. A Tom Brady is developed. He's made. He has to want it. And the organization has to want him to be that good, but you have to develop that. And, you know, I think I've never met Tom Brady, but I think if either of us had a chance to sit down with him and ask him, he'd probably say that to you. He'd probably say, it didn't happen overnight, and it wasn't one thing. It was a succession of a lot of things that made him so great.
Yeah. And the people that invested in him as well along the way. Yeah. And to kind of continue that football.
Go ahead.
Yeah. To continue that football analogy of, it would be interesting to learn the statistics of, you know, football greats that were drafted that ended up being duds versus the, you know, 4th round draft picks that, you know, just shot off into stardom and success.
I'm sure somebody has done that analysis. I mean, you know, with all of the sports stats that are out there today, that someone must have done that. But, you know, like it's a great point, right? Like sometimes when you come in to, whether it's sports or business or whatever, you come into the organization and you might be an underdog, or you might be not thought of as the leading candidate, but those people sometimes want it more than the person who comes in as the top dog, or the one that is expected to be the greatest. And
100%.
You know, that can be true anywhere. I mean, but I also believe that most people, I think if you think back, or you look at people that you maybe have met or worked with, the people that fit that criteria of, like, you know, weren't expected to be great, but, you know, overachieved, there was a mentor or there was a leader in there somewhere, even if it was for a brief period of time, that showed them what was possible, that was a trigger, that was a fueling fire in their experience.
Yeah, that is absolutely correct. And I would argue that is the case for every successful person, no matter what industry that they're in. Yeah,
I would too.
All right. So I ask this of a lot of my guests, of the difference, if there is, in your opinion, the difference between a manager versus a leader. And you even kind of mentioned it earlier in our talk about a manager or a leader. So I think I can kind of guess you do believe there is a difference. Can they be one and the same? Are they always separate? Talk to me a little bit more about that dynamic from your experience and your perspective.
I mean, to me, a manager is a title.
Okay.
And a leader is an experience.
An experience? How so?
And well, because a leader shows the way to the people that they are responsible for leading, if they're good at it. Okay. And, you know, a leader is somebody who, you know, you see these memes and stuff all over LinkedIn and Instagram, and it's like, there's the guy pulling the rope and the guy pushing the team, you know, like, and where does the leader fall in those two situations? Okay. I think the leader gathers everybody around and goes, okay, gang, here's what we're going to do. And you're going to do this, and you're going to do this, and you're going to do this. And together we're going to go forward, and something awesome is going to happen here. A manager only does one of those things. The manager looks around and goes, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, you're going to do this, and I'm going to stand over here and watch you, right? A manager dictates, a manager is a title, but a leader creates an experience for the people that they are leading. They show the way. If they have done that before, they teach, but then they also have to motivate, and they also have to create that feeling of anything is possible. I'm here with you. And especially in a team environment, We're all doing it together. You could start today at McDonald's and be hired as a manager. That doesn't make you a leader, right? You might not know how to do any of the stuff that happens inside of a McDonald's, but they'd hire you today, as a manager. That's different than leadership. And I believe that we have to help more people become leaders and embrace the fact that you make teams, you make results.
Yes.
But a manager, that in a lot of cases, that can be just a title.
Right. And I love that. And I think you used it, if I would remember correctly, the word create twice when describing a leader. And that's something I hadn't specifically thought about, but you are nail on the head, 100% right, that leader creates that environment. They create that vision. They create that team, whatever that is, they are responsible for creating that. And I think that's a very apt word to describe a leader, somebody that creates things. That's phenomenal.
And also create also could kind of touch on inspire a little bit, right? Like, because there has to be this flashpoint. There has to be this vision, so to speak, of like, wow, this is possible.
Yeah. And I will go over there. Yeah.
And until this leader showed me it was possible or made me think that it was possible, I was just going through emotion in a lot of cases, right? So that's why, a leader and leaders typically come to the table with experience of having done it themselves. But if, think about all of your experience in your professional career. If you had just gone through all that and then held it into yourself and if you don't teach it to other people, if you don't teach it to your kids, if you don't teach it to your friends and neighbors, then what value is it just sitting inside of you, right? You've got to go push that out into other people so that they can go do the same thing.
Right. 100% agree. Now, you've said also value several times, and I know that is a big part of your business identity, if you want to call it that. And you do a weekly coaching for all of your clients and not even people that aren't even your clients, right?
Yeah.
Talk to me more about that program. You said you call it the MVP Weekly Sales Success Meeting. Is that correct?
That's right. So, so basically, and I actually recently took the word sales out of it because I've had so many, we talk a lot about sales, but I call it the MVP Weekly Success Meeting. And basically in my LinkedIn network and former colleagues and customers, I just kept finding myself meeting business to business salespeople who were a lot like the situation I was telling you about in my own professional experience, where they had developed a degree of success on their own, but then they got to a point where they just felt like something was missing. And 9 times out of 10, it seems to be like they get into a position in an organization, or they buy a business or start a business, and then they hit a level and they don't know how to go further. So I just started asking people, I was like, if I just did a weekly sales call every week that was totally free, no strings attached, but a place where you could go for 30 minutes and learn something about how to develop your skills. And people were like, oh my God, I'd do that in a minute. And so I just started doing that because I was like, I wish somebody had plugged me into something like that, when I was struggling. And so what we've ended up having is I've got people from the media and advertising, because that's kind of my background, but I've got, I've got digital signage people in there. I've got car salespeople in there. We have merchant processing salespeople in there. We've got digital, I've got funnel builders that are in there. And I've got people who sell, all sorts of stuff. Or I actually have 2 college students in there who don't sell anything, but they're trying to develop their own skills so that when they get out of school, out of their master's program, they can sell themselves to employers. And so we just started doing that. And each week we do 4 things every week. It's very, very simple. And none of the calls take longer than 35 or 40 minutes. We start off with wins. We go around the horn, and anybody who's had a win, we encourage them to talk about it and what happened to them that week. And I don't care what it is. I don't even care if it's business related. I just want people to start their Wednesday, which is when we do this, with something positive, and to hear other things that other people are doing so that they can realize that stuff they're doing in their lives is awesome, just like everybody else's. So we start with wins. We talk a little bit about things that are coming up that they can plug into, whether it's events or coaching things or stuff that's happening that beyond this 30 minutes that they can learn something somewhere else. We talk about that. Then we do a quick lesson. And I typically talk to the people in the group and I'm like, what would you like to learn over the next few weeks? And if I hear the same theme come up over and over again, we kind of move towards that. And then we end the week with a homework assignment, something that like every week based on what we're talking about, where even no matter what industry you come from, we're all working on the same assignment. And it's a 5-minute thing. It's like, please post in the group about, a way that you applied last week's lesson to your day. And it's an accountability thing. And we don't force anybody, but it's just a place people can come if in their business, they don't have a reliable way to get training or information. So that's why we do it. And it was not something I ever anticipated doing, but it's so fun because you get to hear other people's success stories and that kind of fires you up in the middle of the week.
Yeah. And that the value of that you're providing to those people that choose to join you it can't be quantified really, because it touches on so many different aspects and areas of their life, right? Their relationships, their business, like everything.
Yeah. And so I one of the people that's in that group, I coach them privately, outside of the group. And, she was telling me today, she's like, 2 weeks ago, she was struggling with a situation that was a very important decision that she needed to make about a career choice. And she said, I heard other people in the group talking about how they had processed important decisions that they needed to make in their lives about career or family. And she's like, just something that somebody said in the group helped her come up with a way to solve this particular situation she was working on. And it was just nice to know that these people are networking with each other. And they didn't know each other before this group was formed. So it's kind of nice to know that in addition to what I'm able to contribute, whatever that is, they're also working with each other offline without me involved. And they might not have otherwise met each other if not for the group. So that's always a nice added bonus.
Yeah, that's awesome. Congratulations on that.
It's great.
Amazing. Well, I think we've been going for quite a while.
Well,
this has been so fascinating to me. And I hope the viewers haven't been too put out by our longer episode today.
Well, I'm sorry. I just get so excited talking about this stuff, especially.
No, I do too. So. This is amazing. How do they get into your 30-minute free training so they can start being part of that group? And 2, how do they get a hold of you in general? What's the best?
Sure. So my website is just my name, Jeff Sarault, Jeff. It's SARAULT.com, jeffsarault.com. There's a link to reach me directly on there. You can join the MVP Weekly Success Call directly from the website. My Instagram and Twitter and LinkedIn, all my social media is at the Jeff Sarault. And so all my socials are the same and people can reach me there, DM me anytime. And, one of the things I really like to do is to connect people with other people. So if I can't answer a question somebody has, Kale, I'll send them to you. I'll send them to anybody. I want to make sure that people get the right information when they're struggling with something or when they have something to share with other people. So anybody wants to reach out to me, I love to create networks. So
it's perfect. Well, gang, those links will be in the description of this podcast and video. Please make sure you check out Jeff's group. I think it's pretty obvious that the opportunity for growth and advancement and learning something in that group is uncomparable to anything else. So again, Jeff, I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being willing to talk with me and my audience today. It has been fascinating and eye-opening. I really appreciate it. So thank you.
So, thanks for the opportunity, Kale. It was great to chat with you, and hopefully we'll get to do it again.
All right, gang. So no matter where you're at in the world, hey, I appreciate you. You guys have a rest of your afternoon that is fantastic and phenomenal. Bye.